first, I'd like to ask you about first. It was when a young Romanian-born businessman, Jacques Houseman, moved to the United States and became a major force in the American theater as a director and producer.
But that was long after that. I spent 7 years, 6, 7 years in the United States in the international grain business, in the course of which, as a matter of fact, I lived in Galveston, among other places.
Galveston, Texas. I didn't know that about you. What motivated you, first of all, to come to the United States and then to change careers?
I always wanted to come to the United States, and I got an offer, a very attractive offer from not the family firm, but friends of my father's who invited me. And then fortunately, I went bankrupt at the age of 28.
Best thing that ever happened to you. Right?
Best thing that ever happened. So then I went into the theater out of desperation, and it turned out all right.
What had been your involvement with the theater before your professional
I had
involvement?
a lot of friends who were in the theater in England and in America, and I'd always had a great deal of fascination for the theater. And when I went broke, the only way I knew of that I could earn a living was writing for the theater. I would translate plays, adapt plays, and even write plays, and made a very meager living doing that. And then Mr. Virgil Thompson, who's in this hotel at this moment, for some insane reason of his own, invited me to help him stage and produce his opera that he'd written with Gertrude Stein, 4 Saints in 3 Acts. And the minute I did that, I realized that that's what I wanted to do in life, and pursued it.
The rest was history then. The second metamorphosis to which you refer in your 3-volume autobiography was when you became an actor at the age of, what, 72 or so?
70.
Like 70. Excuse me for advancing it on you there. How did that come about?
By accident, by one of those very, very fortunate accidents. A young man whom I'd befriended, who'd written a play that I rather admired. He was a very young man, and who'd been my stage manager at the University of California when I had a professional company there, had become a successful writer and then a writer-director. And he kept in touch with me, and he called me one day in great excitement, told me about this wonderful book about the Harvard Law School, and that he had Timothy Bottoms to play the young man, and James Mason to play the professor. And then about a month later he called and said, well, we lost James Mason. He couldn't leave Spain. He was in the middle of a picture. And he began a search for Kingsfield, and I kept giving him suggestions. Turned out that most of them were employed, unavailable, or dying. So then he still didn't have one when he was already shooting in Toronto. And finally he said, how would you like to play it? I said, I'd love to play it, but you better not suggest it to the studio because they'll throw you off the picture. They'll think you're crazy. And weeks more went by, and he was really getting very frantic. And so I said, all right, I'll come up to Toronto and learn some lines, and we'll make a test. And if it stinks, we'll burn it. And if it's any good, we'll talk to the studio. And it turned out quite well. In fact, we used some of it in the picture. And that was it.
The role made you something of an instant celebrity, I suppose, a household word virtually.
Not instant. It took a long time. You know, first the picture got released, and I got nice reviews for that. Then the whole machinery of the awards began to churn around, and I got nominated, and that was nice. And then finally I got the award, to my absolute amazement. And it was not until after that that the effects began to be felt. I started to get offered parts, and I became not successful, but moderately
I would say successful.
actor.
How does it feel to have spent one distinguished career as director and producer, but then become known to the public for something entirely different?
That's very funny, because there I was working myself to death for 40 years as a producer, director, and teacher, and obviously and quite properly, nobody knew me from a hole in the ground. I mean, except within the trade.
Directors and producers, of course, in the background.
As it should be. They should stay in the background. But then suddenly I played one part, and everybody began to recognize me. It's very gratifying, but sort of slightly ironic.
How do you handle the criticism which I have heard voiced of your television appearances for various kinds of products?
I don't pay any attention to it at all. Especially nowadays, you know, if Lord Olivier and Sir John Gielgud can do it, I can do it. I mean, that takes care of my humiliations.
Well, they and you are in perfectly good company, I must say.
And no, you know, I've made one or two that were unfortunate, but even that was interesting. I mean, I did one for McDonald's, and I've always enjoyed McDonald's. I've been in summer theaters where the only place you could eat was McDonald's. So I had no bad things about that, but it turned out not to be a success as a commercial. The kids, I think, said, who the hell needs that old poop to tell us about hamburgers? We can find our own hamburgers, thank you. So it was not a success. It was the only one that I've ever done that turned out, and I've seen the tests and things, I've seen the reports, and it just was not a good idea.
Are you like the Professor Kingsfield character whom you portray in real life?
Well, you know, as an actor, you shouldn't ask that question. It's always this interesting question of how much are you Leonardo? How much are you that crusty?
Only this month.
That crusty old man. How much am I Kingsfield? How much of Kingsfield has, over the years, come off onto me? I don't know.
John Houseman, thank you for visiting with us. We can only wait for your third or fourth career now for our next interview. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, check.